All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Pioneer Award webinar. Um, I just want to remind you that this is being recorded and it will be posted on our website probably a week or so after this concludes. If you have any issues, technical issues throughout the webinar, please use the chat box and you can ask for assistance there. However, if you have questions that you would like answered during the webinar, please use the Q&A box that you can find. Sometimes it's under the little more with the three dots on that. Please use that to ask your questions, and we will be looking there for those once we get to that point. All right. So to begin, I'm just going to reiterate that please submit your questions in the Q&A box. If you have any scientific or kind of situationally specific questions, we will not be answering those during the webinar. We ask that instead you please email us so we can answer them privately, and maybe even set up a time to talk with Trish about those. So you can reach out to us with your additional questions at pioneerawards@mail.nih.gov. And this webinar recording and slides will be posted on our website at commonfund.nih.gov/pioneer. And we also have a lot of great resources on our website if you haven't been there yet. So if you need more application guidance, go to our website, look at our application and award guide. It includes some great things like example applications and much more detailed information on how to put together your application. All right, so I'm just going to introduce our panelists for today. I'm Becky Miller. I'm a program officer, program leader in the Office of the Director. I help with the HRHR program, the High Risk, High Reward Research Program, which Pioneer is a part of. But as our panelists today, we have Trish Lebowski, who is overseeing the HRHR overall program, as well as specifically the Pioneer Award. And we also have Jim Lee, who is the Scientific Review Officer for the Pioneer Award from the Center for Scientific Review. So thank you for joining us. And with that, I'm going to let Trish take over.
Okay, great. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for joining today. I'm really happy to see that there's a lot of people logged in and that you all are interested to hear about the Pioneer program. To give you a little bit of background to orient you as to where we are within NIH, we're in this office called the Office of Strategic Coordination, or the NIH Common Fund. The Common Fund has a lot of many different sorts of programs, and the slide in front of you shows there's 27 programs in 3 relatively broad categories. And the main reason for showing you this is that the money for this Pioneer comes from the Common Fund, but also we want to make sure you're aware of the Common Fund because a lot of resources, we generate a lot of resources. On the next slide, I don't think I can do the slides, can I? Okay. And some of these resources could be really useful for some of your research. There are new funding opportunities that come out. There's access to high-end instrumentation, like in the cryo-EM program. So many databases, too many to list. Lots of unique reagents and protocols for really interesting cutting-edge science. So this gives you an idea of where the Pioneer Award is within this space. On the next slide, you can see that HRHR over there on the bottom is highlighted in red. And that's where we are here today to talk about the Pioneer program. The next slide. There's 4 programs in the high risk, high reward. Well, there's 4 awards in the high risk, high reward research program. Okay. They're listed there: the Pioneer, New Innovator, Transformative Research Award, and Early Independence Award. They're all a little bit different. But they're all similar in that they're designed to support scientists at many different career stages, some of them with eligibility restrictions, but these scientists that propose really bold and high risk, high impact research projects. On the next slide, We have a funding opportunity for each one of these, all four, every year. So if you're going to apply to the Pioneer Award, you're going to apply to a specific funding opportunity. Okay, next slide. Your idea is intended to be high risk and very high impact. We are okay with risk. You're going to have to decide, you're going to have to explain and convince reviewers that you have a plan to get around the risk, but we're okay with the risk. So please bring your high risk, high impact ideas. The next slide. We do not require any preliminary data or any detailed experimental plan. Now, that's going to be really obvious with the Pioneer Award, with the length of the application that you're thinking about writing. But really, we don't require it. Now, reviewers, if you give them any preliminary data, they're going to evaluate it. So be aware of that. But really, we want the best ideas. The next slide. This is one of the questions that I get asked all the time. Is my scientific area relevant for a Pioneer Award? And I inevitably say yes. We are open to any scientific topic relevant to the NIH mission. So anything in behavioral, social, biomedical, applied, formal sciences, basic, translation, or clinical research, everything. If, as long as it's relevant to the NIH, yes, it's relevant to the Pioneer program. The next slide, we're encouraging everyone to apply. We want applications from investigators with diverse backgrounds and from all eligible institutions. There's an eligibility section in the funding opportunity, and I bet your institution is eligible. So yes, we want you to apply. There's no institutional restrictions there. The next slide. This is the high risk, high reward working group. And I just want to point out all these acronyms after every individual's names. We have representatives from all of the 27 institutes and centers at NIH. So we have people that are interested in this program and in the applications and the awards from all walks of science across the NIH. And that's important too, because odds are you look at this and you see, oh, there's my institute where I get my R01s from. Yes, they're there, they're paying attention, and we care. So the next slide. So I'm going to shift to talk a little bit about the Pioneer Award specifically. This was the first of the high risk, high reward awards set up back in 2004. And the goal is to support individual scientists, not teams, with an incredible record of creativity and innovation. And these individuals should be proposing pioneering approaches to huge challenges in biomedical behavioral research. So again, it's a single PI application only. Yes, you can have collaborations, and we can talk about how to document that in your application, but it is for a single PI. This is open to all career stages, but you have to have a track record of creativity and innovation. The word pioneer might imply this should be a somewhat new research direction for the applicant. It doesn't mean it's a total 180, but it cannot be the obvious next step in your research program. You need to supply 3 letters of reference. These are not letters of support, they're reference letters. And there are details, of course, in the funding opportunity of how to have individuals submit these. So they should submit them. You should not, as the PI. You need to commit a major part of your research effort to this. So it has to be 51% or more for the first 3 years. After that, it comes down a little because these are not renewable, and we know you might need to replace them. So you might need to decrease your effort in the last 2 years of the award. There's a fixed budget. It is $700,000 per year for 5 years total, and then plus there's indirect or F&A costs on top of that. So that's the budget, period, 700. On the next slide, we developed this table a while ago to show you sort of the difference between the Pioneer application and an R01 application that you're probably more used to. So for an R01, of course, use a specific Ames page. For the DP1 Pioneer, no, don't even upload it. The research strategy in an R01 is, pretty long, used to be longer, right? But it's 12 pages, detailed experimental plan, detailed preliminary data. For the Pioneer, it's 5-page essay. That's all, just 5 pages. You don't have room for those details, even if you wanted to put them in. So 5 pages only. R01, you include biosketches of all your key personnel, collaborators, etc. Now, for the Pioneer, it's only your biosketch, only the applicant's biosketch. For a bibliography, all the references you use, of course you have that in an R01. For a Pioneer, no, you do not upload that document. You can, of course, put essential references, but they have to fit in the 5 pages of the essay. You can abbreviate them. It can be a DOI, okay? The budget, you have to have a very detailed and super well justified budget for an R01, especially if you're asking for more than the modular amount. But we do not want that for the Pioneer. No, we won't even accept it. So it's only 3.5 million total over the 5 years, plus the indirects. There's no letters of support for the DP1. As I mentioned, you can have a collaboration, but you just talk about that in the essay. Your research effort, you have to put in at least 51% for the first 3 years. For an R01, it depends on what the research project is. Letters of reference, now you can't have those for an R01, but yes, you must have them for a DP1. So this is a useful table to sort of compare and contrast when you're thinking about R01s that you've applied to in the past. This is quite different. You want to give yourself enough lead time, especially to collect those letters of reference. Give your letter writers plenty of time to write those letters. And the next slide. Okay, unless we say differently in the funding opportunity, follow the instructions in the standard SF424 application guide. So that means that if you're using vertebrate animals, you need to include a vertebrate animal section, or human subjects, or authentication, etc. Okay, now those documents, the addition of them, they do not drive a score, but they must be there. So please include them. We understand, and the reviewers will be told that you may not, the applicant may not have worked out all the details yet, and you won't have all the details for all these documents, but do the best you can. And reviewers will read through those documents. So the next slide. All right, here's the essay for 5 pages. These are the headings that we want you to use, all right? You have to designate a project science area. So that's defined in the funding opportunity, but this will be important. Jim might talk about that a little bit for the review part. You want a title, a short description, right? You're gonna, well, it's not that short. This is one of your main sections. Describe what you're going to do. Why is this innovative? You don't need to put in preliminary data, but you can, and if you do, it goes here. You say that you're going to, you remind the reviewers that in order to comply with the funding opportunity, you don't need to provide a detailed experimental plan. But you have to provide enough evidence that you've really thought this through carefully and that you have a plan that will be robust and rigorous. So you really need to convince reviewers that you've got a plan. You might talk about alternatives. You might talk about go, no go inflection points. That's up to you. Depends on the project, of course. Provide under PI's innovativeness, provide evidence that you have been innovative in the past. You can talk about projects, collaborations, things that you've done scientifically in the past. You need to explain how this is a change in research direction. And it's not just maybe incorporating a new technique or maybe a new gene family. This is a really tough review criteria. It's one of the review criteria. And you need to make sure that the reviewers are convinced you're actually changing. This is not the next obvious step forward for you for your research plan. Describe under suitability, describe why the proposal is high risk, high reward rather than traditional, like for an R01. You should include a statement that you will commit 51% research effort. That's research effort. Okay, that's really important. It's not total effort, it's research effort. Because some people do not have 100% of their effort that they're allowed to use for research. So keep that in mind. And then finally, the bibliography or any citations. You don't have to include this, but you might want to. And again, you can have, it doesn't have to be a long version. It can be DOI identifiers or something like that, however it works for you, because we know you're not going to want to take up a lot of space with that. Okay, the next slide. All right, so make sure that what you're writing is going to be able to be digested and appreciated by scientists that will be outside your immediate scientific area. Okay, you're a neuroscientist and you're writing this essay, but it could well be that a geneticist will be one of the reviewers. It could be a molecular biologist, anybody, right? So if you get to the point where you're a finalist, I can almost guarantee it that you are not going to have 3 neuroscientists reviewing your application. So make sure that it's accessible for people that are outside your area. And we give you some pointers here. We think it might be helpful to start your essay with a description of the field and the current state of the art or challenges, and provide context for why what you're saying you're going to do is all that innovative and hopefully impactful. Be careful with jargon. You want to ease the reader into jargon. If it's very detailed and very jargonful and hard to read, it's going to be hard for that geneticist that's not a neuroscientist to wade through the jargon and get to the important parts. So be careful with that. We've already talked about no preliminary data are required, and the detailed experimental plan is not required, but you need to make sure those reviewers understand that you have a plan. So talk about the risks and how you're going to get around them. How are you going to deal with them when they come up? And then finally, you need to convince the reviewers that, like any research project, the work will be performed in a robust and rigorous and reproducible manner. How are you going to validate your new approaches? You should have estimates for the numbers of subjects that you might be including. Make sure you always include sex as a biological variable. So make sure you include things like that. Same as you would really for an R01, the right tone and the right content has to be there. So the next slide. Yes, the data management and sharing plan. Yes, you need to include this. And this is not specific to the Pioneer Award. This is an NIH, a general NIH requirement. So the instructions are here. You attach it in the other plan section, okay? You shouldn't exceed 2 pages, and you need to include all the things there, what type of data, what software or tools you're going to develop, what the standards are, how you're going to preserve the data, all of this, access, etc. If there are costs for it, then you can include that in the budget justification. But in general, remember, we do not want a detailed budget. So that would be the only thing that you would include, all right? And this is not final and written in stone. If your application is chosen for an award, we can make adjustments during the just-in-time process. But it will become one of the terms and conditions of the award, similar to any other NIH award. So we don't have all the guidance for this on our website. It's on the general sharing.nih.gov for examples and more information and questions. And there's a lot of FAQs there as well. Okay, the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to Jim to talk about the review. Thanks, Jim.
Hi, thanks, Trish. So you hear me okay, right? Okay, so my name is Jim Lee. I'm a scientific review officer at NIH Center for Scientific Review. I will manage the upcoming Pioneer Review. So here, next few slides, I'll just give you a brief overview of the process. Yes, thank you. So the Pioneer Review, it goes through 3 phases as outlined here. The application, I think, is submitted in early September. And in the phase 1, your application will be reviewed by 3 mail review. Okay, and that's probably happens in October, December this year. And then once the mail reviewer submitted their comments, it move on to the phase 2, a panel review, where generally it conducted in January, March, early March, to identify about 25, approximately 25 finalists for phase 3, which is include a PR presentation, Q&A session, and followed by the panel discussion and the final score. That will be tentatively set in late March next year. So that's the overall review process. And maybe I have the next slides. Okay, as Trish mentioned, and also it's outlined in the RFA, when you submit your application, you need to declare a broad scientific area for your Pioneer project, right? A primary area is required, and a secondary area is optional. You should do that in the SF 424 form, the box agency routing number box 4B. Also in the research strategy section, but in the box 4B, that's critical is if you put some information there, it's much easier for us to compile the list and to understand, what type of application we're receiving in this particular round. That's the 9 scientific area as outlined in the RFA you should choose. Next slide. So in the mail review phase, right? All Pioneer application will be reviewed in one special panel. So in your cover letter or anywhere else, you don't have to specify any particular study session you think it should go. And the mail reviewer or in those 9 broad scientific topics area will be recruited to review your application. So generally, it's each application assigned to 3 mail reviewer, and 2 reviewer will be have expertise in the declared, those are primary scientific area generally, and 1 reviewer will be in those secondary scientific area to review your application. And the focus will not be in the on the R1 typical review criteria. Rather, they're going to focus on, they were instructed to focus on the Pioneer review criteria, focus on the significance and innovation. And the PI has a track record of conducting highly innovative research. And also, the project should be a substantial change in research direction, motivated by a fundamental new insight. I think Tricia already emphasized a couple of times, this is a Pioneer program. It's not for application where it's viewed as a sort of next logic extension of your typical R1 when you do the renew, right? If it's a view like that way, generally it will be scored poorly as part of the Pioneer review. Next slide. So for the panel reviewer, generally it's a group of scientists with a diverse scientific background that cover all the 9, broadly all the 9, topic area, and they were doing so that the panel reviewer will conduct the phase 3, phase 2, and the phase 3 review, and they were informed by the mail reviewer critique the input, and they were select 25 finalists that were deemed to be the most Pioneer application, and that will be in the late March for a presentation, followed by the panel discussion, right? The finalist notification will be sent out hopefully in early March, and Sometimes the last few might be delayed due to the fact that we're limited to about 25 finalists, but there was a couple of last few, there may be a disagreement among the reviewer. There may be involved more even pre-meeting discussion or some other method to finalize the final number. So next slide. So the final interview consideration will be really just focused on the Pioneer review criteria as outlined in the RFA, right? It's a PI individual with a solid track record of exceptional scientific creativity, right? Does the proposal really have a potential, broad impact, high risk, high reward? Does the proposal represent a substantial different scientific direction, already, being conducted in the PI's sort of research program or elsewhere, or some other lab? So just keep in mind, that's a substantial change, not only for your lab, but also has to be highly innovative in the overall scientific field, right? It can't be just a new direction for you, but a lot of other scientists are working on the same problem. Then the innovation will be considered modest in that example, right? The emphasis on the review is, once again, it's on the investigator track record. It's looking for a highly innovative project for potential a broad sort of impact. And it's, once again, it's not a logic extension sort of a project that's likely can be supported by a conventional NIH funding mechanism. So here's a kind of a comparison. As I guess Tricia showed a similar table. This is from the review perspective, right? So for when you do the R1, regular R1 review, it's one phase of the meeting. And while in the Pioneer review, it's two different phases where you start with a main reviewer followed by a panel reviewer. And then in the end, there will be the finalists will have the opportunity to give to give a presentation followed by a Q&A with a panel reviewer. And for the R1, the assignment will be more close to the subject area for the topic you're submitted. And where for the Pioneer review, generally it's a broadly matched for the mail review, right? You have this 9 broadly assigned topic area, and to match the expertise declared by the mail reviewer versus the scientific topic area you declared in your application. And for the panel reviewer, it's even more broadly matched. Generally, it's not assigned to any particular specific scientific topic area. And the review criteria in the standard 5 R1, it's a 5 standard criteria, where in the Pioneer, it's a focus, once again, it's a focus on the 3 area. It's a significance in innovation and, the track record of innovation of the past, and whether this is a substantial new research direction, where when the R1 review, the focus tend to be approach and feasibility, where in the Pioneer, that's to be de-emphasized, where the focus on the investigator and innovative aspect of the project. So that may be my last slides for the review. Is there? Okay, yeah. So that's my that's the sort of overall process of the review.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now that you've had an overview of kind of the application and submission process as well as the review, we're going to open this up to your questions. So we did ask people to submit questions ahead of time via email, but we're also able to take live questions right now. Once again, please submit your questions in the Q&A box. What I've done is I've tried to bin them in some certain topic areas. So for instance, this first one is on eligibility questions. So I'm going to moderate this, so please go ahead and add your questions to the Q&A box and we will get to them as best we can. All right, so seeing our questions, Trish, one of our questions, can a research faculty non-tenure track be a PI on the project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll broaden that out too, not only just research track, but PIs at any stage, whether they're research track or not, right? So the quick answer is yes. Those individuals are certainly eligible. The way that we the way that eligibility is established is really by your institution. Okay, so your institution will only authorize a grant application if you as an individual are eligible to apply, right? So they probably would not let a postdoc, for example, apply to this, but non-tenure track faculty, yes, they would. So if you're eligible to apply for an R01 from your institution, then I would say, yes, you are eligible to apply for a DP1 for a Pioneer award.
Excellent. All right. Are there is there a limit on the number of applications an institution can submit for this one?
Institutions, no. Institution can submit as many as they want. Each PI can only submit one.
Excellent. And does having an R01 impact your eligibility?
No, the only issue is that you must have 51% effort available, right? Research effort available for the award if you get it. You can apply, without having that carved out yet, but you would need to solidify that if you're chosen for an award, and that could be done in the just in time. But if you have some other sort of award that keeps you locked in at more than 50 or more than 49% effort in that place, you might not be eligible to apply for the DP1. So if that's the case, you should probably talk to me or talk to whatever program officer it is that's on that other award that you have more effort on. But usually if you had a couple other R01s that added up to over 50%, then you can probably negotiate things and make 51% available, but you might need to work on that.
All right. And what does it mean exactly to have a record of creativity? And what if this is the first high risk, high reward idea that one has that fits this program?
Well, you don't have to have received a previous HR award to have a record of creativity or innovation. I mean, you can talk about your previous work and what was innovative in that work, what was creative in that work. Maybe you put together some creative interdisciplinary collaborations. Maybe you pioneered some technology in some other space, or you were the first to use it to make or to apply it to one of your research questions. There's a lot of ways that you can phrase your background, you can explain your background as being creative or innovative. Anything that you've done that's new and novel, by definition, would be innovative. So you need to talk about that in a way that the broad scientists, the reviewers, are going to be able to appreciate that. Don't let them assume and don't let them need to come to conclusions. You need to explain it, why what you've done in the past is innovative.
All right. And then just some other questions along that same vein. Like, how new must the new research direction be? And can you comment more on the definition and limit of this?
Oh, meaning like the change in research direction?
Yeah, like how new, I guess maybe more, how new is
Right.
it? Field or
Well, it
novel?
should, well, as Jim said, it should be new to both you and the field. If it's something that others are already working on, it might not be seen as pioneering, right? It could easily have the foundation in your previous work. But if it's something that is sort of an obvious scale up, or an extension, a logical extension of your previous work, that will not be viewed as new or pioneering. So, maybe it reflects a fundamental new insight. Maybe it's a new technology that you're applying to a problem that you've been working on for a while. There's a lot of ways that you can articulate that it's pioneering and that it's new. But if the reviewers think that PI should be doing that already, they won't review that criterion very well.
Yeah, I think from a review perspective, what I find was obviously each reviewer, what's considered substantial change, even among reviewers, there's a different take, a different way weighing them, right? Just like anything else, they have a different opinion. But probably the best way to do is once you have your project, and maybe talk to one of your non-collaborating colleague, give you honest feedback. They know your research area, and would they say this is a substantial change for you? But don't ask your collaborator, because they are just to collaborate with you, and maybe they might not give you a very kind of unbiased opinion. Just ask your colleague or some other people in some other institution.
No, great insight.
That's really important. I want to emphasize what Jim just said. Don't just have your closest colleagues read this to your application. It's only 5 pages. Surely you can get some people to read it for you, but have someone that's not in your research area read it for you and really make sure that they understand it, not just for the pioneering part, but also that it's accessible to a broader audience. I think we can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, and we were still getting questions about, like, does this requirement for the new scientific direction require a new primary scientific area, or can it be a new scientific area?
Well, it
And like
can.
how different does it need to be from your own research field?
It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be a 180. It doesn't even really need to be a 90-degree turn, but it cannot be the next obvious logical step. It's hard to say precisely it has to be 27.5-degree turn, right? We don't know. You're going to have to convince reviewers that you wouldn't do this if you weren't applying and if you don't receive this Pioneer Award. So if you already have publications in this area, it's going to be a hard sell, I think, for it to be much of a change in direction. It depends. I've seen it go both ways.
All right. There's another question asking for more clarity on the research effort requirement. So, for instance, if someone's research effort is 80%, where does that 51% come from?
So I think I understand it, Becky. So if you have 100% of your effort and 80% of that is a research effort, right? So then a little over half, so it has to be 40+% of your total effort then would be for this grant. So it has to be 51% of your available research effort. In that case with the 80 available, say you have clinical duties that are 20%. We don't want 51% of the whole thing. We only want 51% of the research effort. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's not like you're just saying 6 months. It's actual whatever your effort is. Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And it's gonna differ a lot for applicants. We know that.
Another question along that same line. If you don't have 51% effort, is the expectation that if awarded, you will readjust effort from existing grants?
Yes, that's one way to do it. Yep.
Okay.
But you want to talk to those program officers on those existing grants and make sure that that's even possible.
All right.
Because we can't make the award if you can't, specify 51%. And I don't want to get into that position.
All right. There's kind of a comment, but maybe you can expand on this. So, most of the awardees likely have a good track record of successful research funding, but maybe do you have some advice for people who may not have that extensive track record themselves?
I don't get it. You mean advice about what? About
So
their
if an
records?
applicant, I think this is what they're getting to, like if you're an applicant who may not have a very long or full funding history um, for research grants, what advice would you give to them in putting together an application for this, or is kind of dead on arrival?
No, it's not dead on arrival. The reviewers need to appreciate your record of innovation and creativity, not your record of funding. Nowhere in that statement did I say record of funding, right? It doesn't mean they won't look at it, but what you need to emphasize is what you've been doing in your career that's exceptionally creative or innovative, and how that track record would lead directly into the success of the proposal that you're putting forward here. So innovation and creativity is not always the same as funding. It could be, but not always. Does that help?
I hope so. I think so. We'll see in the chat.
I guess so from the review, maybe I don't know if this question means like if somebody is really in their early stage of career, they have a limited funding history track record. I would say, yeah, it will be challenging because if you let's say if you're independent running the lab for 2 years, then your independent track record, I guess, or funding history going to be limited. So in those cases, what I see, at least from the review, what they do is maybe you have a lot of innovation that as a result of your postdoc work, and then that should reflect in the reference letter somehow.
Mhm.
That might help your case. But I would say it is challenging if you have a limited independent record, as an independent PI, because your previous work the review will be hard to distinguish, whose idea that come from, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's
Yeah. All right. Thank you. A question about if the investigator already has about more than 2 million in total costs from NIH research project grants, will this affect the chances of receiving the DP1?
No, no, we're concerned more about research effort rather than total funding.
Excellent. Okay. Another question about the investigator's skill set. So, if there are new skills that are needed to execute the proposal, is it sufficient to say that you will have collaborators who are experts in those skills?
Is it sufficient to say that? It should be. As you know, you cannot have letters of support for those collaborators. So if you've published with them in the past, that's always more convincing. But if it's a new research direction, it might well be that you have not published with them in the past. So you need to talk about the collaboration in the essay to be convincing to reviewers that it's a real collaboration. What will those people do? But what have you brought to the field here? And importantly, remember we've said it's a lot about you as a person. So if you have a history of really interesting collaborations that you brought together, that would be helpful. So you could talk about that in your history of creativity and innovation. There's a lot of ways to be convincing with that. But really, the key is always to convince the reviewers. Jim, I don't know if you had any experience with that and wanted to say anything about it.
I think that there seems to be, at least from the reviewer perspective, there's like a sweet spot, right? So you have to make substantial change, either using new technology or new research theme for the Pioneer project. But if it's a 180-degree, you start as a population scientist, you're doing a computational cancer biology or something, you totally rely on your collaborator, then I think the reviewer might question whether Pioneer program is the way to go, or you should find some other HHR program where, you know, multi-PI is allowed, right? So I think from the review, at least based on the way I see in the past, there seems to be a sweet spot.
Absolutely. All right. I think those are mostly for eligibility. If you have further questions on eligibility, feel free to put them in the Q&A. We can return back to this, but I think for now we're going to go and move on to questions about application and submission. So let's see, there are questions about what topics are of the highest interest for this award?
The answer is yes. There really isn't a specific singular area of interest. And the whole point is that the work needs to really be pioneering, innovative, bold, exciting, and it doesn't matter which area of interest it's in. Yeah, so I would say that there's no one specific area that would have priority over any other. Now, when it comes to the point where we're making funding decisions, oftentimes we look for variety or diversity of science in the area of the portfolio. So if we have 5 applications that are going to be supported, they're all, let's just say, in cancer, something really important with cancer, or imaging with cancer. And then number 6 is also focused in cancer. That might not be good. And we might look at something that's, you know, neurobiology. I'm just making up areas here. We never have 5 in a row that are all cancer, but that's the only time we take the area of science into consideration in terms of the funding.
Okay. And then there's a request to talk more about the difference between the Pioneer Award and the Transformative Research Award.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, Jim, you've done both recently. Do you want to take that one? I'm hogging the scene here.
Sure. So if you look at the RFA instruction, right? So the Pioneer Award is it's an investigator focused, and it's a 5-page essay, no specific aim. In terms of the project, they are looking for high risk, potentially high broad impact that can transform it, right? It's not like a typical project where you can fund it by a typical study session, so to speak. Like you can go, if it's some project where you can just do a R21, get a preliminary data, then you submit R1, then that's not what Pioneer or Transformative R1 we're looking for. Okay, we talk a lot about Pioneer now. So for the Transformative, it's a 12-page, it can be multi-PI. I think the budget is somewhat flexible based on the scope of the project. And also the Transformative, at least this year, it's a review a little bit different. It goes through an anonymized review process and followed by a more standard review discussion, where the Pioneer review for the 25 finalists, you will have opportunity to give a presentation and Q&A with a panel, and followed by the panel discussion. So that was, I guess, to highlight the difference as far from the big picture.
Yeah, that's perfect, Jim. I think from an applicant at the stage where folks on this webinar are, I think the key is single PI versus, it could be a single PI for the Transformative, but it could also be a team. So that's one major difference at this stage, you know, in the pre-application stage. Budget, as you mentioned, is the budget sufficient to do the work, right? That needs to be clear, but both need to be really high risk and high reward type applications. So the science might not be that much different, but the application would be. The 5 pages versus 12 is a big difference. And then the anonymized or not is a big difference. So those are some of the differences. And if you still have questions about that, email me and we can talk about specifics.
And we have a Transformative Research Award webinar tomorrow.
Yes, that's right. You can listen to that tomorrow. And the details are, again, in that funding opportunity and or on our website. So you can go to either to register.
All right. And there's a question about when the earliest date you can submit an application is.
Yeah, it's usually about a month ahead of the application due date. So it's listed right there in the funding opportunity. It says earliest open date, and you can't submit it before then. And it's always good to submit early. You don't need to submit a full month early usually, but please do not wait to the last day at 5 p.m. and then hit the submit and walk away. Make sure that you get the answer back from whatever system that you're using, because different institutions use different systems, but it has to go in through grants.gov and it has to be accepted. So make sure that it's accepted before you walk away from your computer for the day. Because by the next morning, if it's after the due date, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I think no late submission accepted for Pioneer. So
Correct.
it's all managed by a receiver referral officer. We have nothing, we can't do anything about it.
Right,
If you're
exactly.
somehow late, if somehow, even though it could be one of your staff in the grants office or something made some error, that's just unfortunate. We can't do anything about it.
Yep.
All right. I guess for both of you, does briefly discussing any preliminary data detract from the idea of the proposal being a new research direction? And does it make the work less novel?
It's a good question. It doesn't need to, but it could. It depends on how much you're giving them with that preliminary data. If it's something small that just says, hey, listen, I haven't published in this area, but we know how to do this imaging and this is a sample of it, I don't think that would be a big deal. But if you were pioneering some new process and you say, here it is, it's 3/4 of the way done, I think that would be not so great. That would, I could see the reviewers saying this should be a standard research grant, not a pioneer. What do you think, Jim? You've reviewed a lot of these.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. I think it's just as I said earlier, if you have some preliminary data, right, show it to one of your colleagues. Just say, hey, I have this one. Would you think this will go through R21, R1, because you have a preliminary data show some feasibility already? Or you think that this is still looks like it's still pretty, innovative. So, then might fit the pioneer, right? So it really depends on your data, how extensive it is, how directly relate to what you want to do, right? If it's a lot there, the reviewer might say, well, this sounds like has a decent feasibility already established. Maybe this will be more appropriate for a typical conventional R1 mechanism. But if you preliminary data, you just show, this might be a new interesting direction. If successful, can have a broad impact, then that preliminary data can be helpful, actually.
All right, excellent. There's a question about, I guess it's success rate, but they ask, of the 25 finalists invited to present, approximately how many will be funded?
Approximately 7 or 8 from past years.
Yep.
So the success rate ends up somewhere around 4 or 5%. It all depends on the year, because we get different numbers of applications every year, and if we have enough extra funds, or if someone else wants to fund one, maybe we might make one more award. Yeah, but usually around 7.
Okay, excellent. There's a question, since this is a common fund supported award, is there a requirement or recommendation to include common fund initiative data or crosstalks with those programs in the proposed work?
Oh, that's interesting. I never would have thought of that. No, absolutely not. No requirement for that. We do, Common Fund does have efforts, especially when it comes to data usage, where you do need to use Common Fund data. But no, this is much broader than that. If you use them and it's helpful, please use them, but it's not required. And I do not think it would give you an advantage in review.
Okay. This is kind of jumping back a bit more towards eligibility, but there's a question about if you were a DP2 investigator, are you eligible for the DP1 with the same area of science?
So you already have a DP2, or you had a DP2 in the past?
It says had, so I guess. in the
Yeah,
past.
well, sure. I mean, you could have had an R01 in the past. You could have had an F32 in the past. Yeah, it would not disqualify you for sure. I don't know that it would be any more helpful or not. I mean, that's up to the reviewers, but yeah.
Another eligibility question. A postdoctoral researcher on an F1 visa, are they eligible for this funding opportunity?
Well, in general, a postdoc is not eligible to submit an R01 from an institution, unless you are. You really need to talk to your grants office to determine that.
But there are no citizenship requirements.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed
as
that
well.
part of
But
it.
no,
Yes.
I bet that.
Thanks.
that's
Yep.
also
No
clarifying.
citizenship requirements, but you have to be from a US-based institution.
Correct. All right, there's a question. Can we email program officials ahead of time to see if the proposed idea meets the criteria for innovation and a new area?
I'm the program officer. You can email me ahead of time, yes. I'm not really going to be able to tell you if the idea is innovative. I will ask you to explain to me how it's innovative. And as long as you can articulate the innovation, I would tell you to go ahead and apply. If you cannot articulate how it's new, novel, innovative, then that's going to be a problem. But yeah, you're going to need to convince reviewers.
All right. And then there's a question about whether or not NIH has measured the impact of this program and what is the rate of funded projects that actually lead to breakthroughs.
I don't know that we have the rate, do we, Becky? I mean, we have done a
kinda
lot of
subjective,
evaluative
yeah.
work, and it's on our webpage. If you go to the Pioneer webpage over on the right-hand side, there's a section called evaluation, and we talk about general success of the program, meaning people that get support through the program. But I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head. Do you, Becky? You're better than I am at those numbers.
I don't know if we have numbers, but we have done an outcomes evaluation on the initiative and found that based on, matched R01 PIs, that our Pioneer awardees are producing significantly more innovative and impactful work based on the outputs. But numbers, I don't recall.
Yeah.
But yeah, evaluations are all posted publicly on our website. Okay, I think those are the main ones for the application. Budget, we didn't really receive much except just to clarify about whether that $700,000 includes indirects or not.
No, it's 700,000 a year plus indirects, whatever the calculated or negotiated indirect costs are for your institution. So it'll end up being more than 700 a year. It depends on what institution you're at. But the funds can be used for anything. Collaborators, co-investigators, supplies, equipment, subcontracts, any allowable costs. Yeah, but that is just the direct cost, 700.
Excellent. All right. We've gotten a lot of questions about letters of reference. All right.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice on the types of reference writers needed? And should these be people from other institutions? And should they be experts in the field of study of the proposed work? Or should they be people closely familiar with the PI's current work?
Yeah, these are really good questions. Let me see if I can remember every bit of that, Becky. So I think if you were applying from University of X, you would not want to have all three of your letters from colleagues at University of X. Remember, you want to have letter writers who would not necessarily benefit directly from you getting this award. So they shouldn't be collaborators on the project. They might be past collaborators, but if you have a departmental chair or your dean, that individual would actually benefit, maybe not directly, but indirectly from you getting the award. So reviewers might not be as impressed by that letter writer, right? So you want people that know you really well, that you've known you for a while, that they know about your past scientific efforts. Hopefully, you know, you've shared your idea with them and they would be excited about the idea. They don't necessarily need to write about the idea for the project, but that's up to you, how much you want to share with them or not. But they should be able to comment on your past track record of creativity and innovation for sure. Maybe on any leadership roles you've played or any management skills, if they, you know how you run your lab or how you've worked in collaborations before. Any of those things would be useful to have information around. Jim, you've read through a lot of these too. What do you think?
Yeah, I think some reviewer, they felt that if you have a reference letter from somebody, not your collaborator, not from your like an own institution, like what they said it was an arm's length. Generally, it seems they carry more weight because it's more of an independent. They know you enough, but they're not really close, like a collaborate with you. They write some reference. Their word might carry more weight than some of your collaborator because they're going to write everything great, right? So that is correct. So if you can find somebody more of like if the leader in the field, like
Yep.
write something, kind of give you another independent sort of a kind of a evaluation of your ability or your past record of conducting innovative research. That would be great.
Yeah, and especially someone that's known you for a while too, if they've only known you since, I don't know, you met them at a Gordon conference last summer and you're having great intellectual conversations, that's nice. But if you have someone that's known you through maybe earlier parts of your training or when you were an assistant professor or whatever, that might hold a little more weight if they've known you for longer and can really speak to your past record, I think. And, it's good to have a mix too, right? Some people that maybe can talk more about your past and maybe some people that talk about maybe some of your more recent accomplishments too. So variety in there might be good.
Yeah, also make sure reference letters submitted by those writer directly, right?
Yep.
We have cases where somehow it's attached in the application as part of like almost like a letter of support. That's not supposed to be happening.
Yeah. And I think that doesn't carry as much weight. If you are submitting your own reference letters, I mean, if you were interviewing a postdoc and they came to the interview with their reference letters in their hands, you don't give those letters as much weight. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Yes, all right. There's also a question about, I mean, you got into this a bit, but what kinds of things should be highlighted in the letters of reference and what goal are the letters filling?
Well, the letters are to document and to give a critique of your past creativity and innovation. Why is this person the right person for a Director's Pioneer Award? They're not for tenure, they're not for the Nobel Prize. They are for this particular award. So, you might share the review criteria and the funding opportunity certainly with the letter writer so that they know that you need to show, for example, a change in your research direction. So perhaps they might be writing about how you're incorporating this new technology into your lab to address these scientific questions a way that have never been able to be done before. I mean, that's just a random example, but something along those lines, I think, would be fitting toward the goal. The goal is to convince reviewers that you're the right person for this award.
Absolutely.
Jim, did you want to add to that?
No, I think that's pretty summarized it pretty good.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, and you already answered this one as well, but just asking about the further content about if it's going to talk about the applicant's past innovation or potential for future innovation or in the context of the application, or is this like a character reference? And I think you answered this, it's all of the above. It'd be good to have a range of letter writers, different areas, but the goal really is I guess the key is really just try to avoid conflict of interest or the appearance of conflict of interest in who your referees are.
And make sure you give them enough time to write this and get it in on time. They have to be in before or at the same time as the application. They turn it in a week after the due date and you're only going to have 2 letters. And I don't think those get reviewed, right, Jim?
Yeah, I think also was a question in the last round. I think the reference writer can submit the letter even before your application is submitted, as it will be saved, stored somewhere, then eventually match your application, right?
I think it doesn't open until the month ahead of time, the same as when the funding opportunity opens.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I mean was like the letter can be submitted, let's say, a week before your application is
sure.
submitted.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also make sure they use the right NOFA number. I think last year there was a couple
Yes.
reference letter because the applicant were submitting several funding opportunity. They all need a reference letter, and the letter for the Pioneer application got lost to some other places. So just make sure
Yes.
you tell your reference writer the correct the RFA number.
Yep.
Yes, so please look at the current funding opportunity, and we've outlined how to submit it with all the information about the website, and please just provide that information to your referees, and make sure that it's up to you to make sure that things are being submitted on time, because it's really sad when your referee, one person forgets to submit it and your whole application gets tossed out and you have to wait for the next year.
Yes, and toward that end, if you applied last year and you're applying again with a new application, you need 3 new letters. I mean, they could be the same letter. The person can write the same letter and just stick a new date on it. We're not going to police that, but the ones that were submitted last year, no, those don't count. So they need to be addressed to the RFA number, and it's RM24-002. So make sure that's in there, and it's on the form, as Becky said. But yeah, if you don't have 3 letters, then that's the end. I'm sorry.
And there was a question about whether the applicant will receive notification when a letter of reference has been submitted. And the answer is yes.
Yes.
You will. And you can actually go into ERA Commons and see how many letters have been submitted and I think by whom. So you can keep track of those you've asked to provide them and just nudge those who are missing. But it's up to you to make sure that that's done. All right. Those are. One question. Oh, it was the same question submitted. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to the review. So we had a couple questions. Here's one question for you, Jim. Are the 3 to 4 review criteria graded on the same 9-point NIH scale? And do the 3 phase 1 reviewers become part of the phase 2 reviewer pool?
Actually, the male reviewer, yes, they will use a 1 to 9, but they will be scored based on the pioneer criteria. And once the male reviewer submitted their critique, the male reviewer comments will be forwarded, will be stored in the ERA comments, the input will be used by the phase 2 panel reviewer, but they will no longer participate in the phase 2. So male reviewer only participate in the phase 1 review.
Yeah, so they are separate groups of reviewers, and
Yeah,
there's no overlap.
Right. So there will be no reviewer serve both as a male reviewer and a panel reviewer.
Okay, another one for you, Jim. The past reviewer lists seem quite light on behavioral scientists, and few behavioral science proposals seem to be funded. Is this mechanism a good fit for behavioral science topics that meet the Pioneer Award criteria?
I think the reviewer are recruited based on the number of type of application we receive. In general, we do not, at least this program does not receive many sort of applications submitted in response to behavioral science application. As a result, we don't recruit that many reviewers for that particular area. So all the panel reviewer are not like we set a panel, wait for the application. We recruit the reviewer based on the type of application you declared in the scientific topic area, right? Then we recruit the reviewer and review your application for this particular special panel.
Yeah, and that carries over to the proportion of awards made as well. We've looked at this and we fund behavioral science awards in the same proportion that we receive them. So, as I mentioned before, we're looking for diversity in scientific areas. So yes, please, as a behavioral social scientist, please submit your application. And frankly, that might give you a little bit of a leg up, because if you get to the finalist stage, that is, because we want more awards like that. But we don't get a lot of those applications. It has to be a strong application in order to make it through the male review and into the finalist pool. But yes, please apply.
Yeah, so Jim, maybe do you want to talk about how the panel is selected? How who those panelists are recruited and who they are?
So the panel reviewer, first and foremost, is we're going to recruit a panel reviewer that can cover some general 9 topic area, right? The broadly scientific area. And most of them are senior scientists who has served various interest study session and familiar with the general system. Then they will be instructed to focus on using the pioneer criteria. So first and foremost, it's they represent the cover all the scientific topic area. Then, but also we want to make sure it's a very diverse panel from a very different geographic, different institution. I don't recall, we never use, like a 2 reviewer from the same institution, so to speak. So that's how they will be recruited.
Okay, thank you. How does the interview panel use the comments of phase 1 reviewers to select candidates to interview, particularly since the 3 reviewers may give divergent scores?
Right. Then they were mainly focused on their comments and their male reviewer score, right? And based on that input, they will make some their own assessment as well, and they will give the panel reviewer will give their score as well. So as you can imagine, sometimes there will be a disagreement, and then eventually, based on their score, everything will come down. We have to come down with some kind of a triage process. And unfortunately, it's just a super competitive. So it's for the male reviewer, there's a difference of opinion. Then you look at their critique, right? And who made the strong argument in their male reviewer critique seems more convincing, and that might carry the day. Because I haven't seen a critique where the reviewer gave very good score, but their critique were somewhat empty, so to speak. Like not as a detailed, informative critique as some others, where more informative critique give a convincing argument might carry the day in that cases. But since this is so competitive, it's just they have a lot of really truly outstanding application to pick and choose. Sometimes they have to go the best of the best among the among the list of a very good application.
All right. Let's see. Those are the main review questions. There are still some requests to further clarify research effort. So people are wondering if research effort only includes NIH funded
Yes,
grants.
yes, NIH funded research.
Okay. And I think that's it. Any other questions? Let's see. No, we did that one. Okay. I think those are all of them that have come in. If anyone else has any questions, oh, here we go. Here's one that just came in. So the NOFO, the funding opportunity, specifies to enter the proposed project dates of September 30th of 2025 with the end date of July 31st of 2030. Will the first year of the award be for 10 months?
No, usually the last year is shorter, and that doesn't mean there's less money. It just means that the final progress report has to be submitted and signed off within that year. So that's the reason for it. You can take at the end of the 5 years, depending on your program officer agreeing, a no cost extension. So it shouldn't matter.
Okay.
How many no cost extensions are allowed? Well, the first one is allowed without any, really much. After that, you would have to work with your program officer. I mean, the idea is not to have this be a 6 or 7 year long award. The idea is to get the work done and out there in 5 or 5.5 years.
All right. And there's a question for Jim. So returning back to reference letters, I thought I saw a slide indicating that these are the first element in the review before the mail review and panel review. Is this correct? And are letters used to screen applicants?
No, you mean the reference letter is a part of the review. The mail reviewer have access to the both application as well as the reference letter. So it's part of the review. It's not like a being used as like a only look at the reference first before even or something. So it's just a part of the review. And also obviously the mail reviewer also look at the reference letter as part of the process to check for potential conflict as a part of the process.
But they're not screening. They don't look at them first and screen people out. No.
No, they don't.
All right. And there's a budget clarification request. So no budget justification is required except for the data management sharing plan.
Correct.
That's correct. Okay. Yes, and that's an NIH requirement that we have to get that justification. So that's why it's the only thing you need to really justify. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. I think we got the ones in the chat. All right. Well, as I'll go ahead and conclude then if we don't have additional questions. Thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that the webinar recording and slides will be posted on our website at commonfund.nih.gov/pioneer, probably in the next week or so. But if you have additional questions, please email us at pioneerawards@mail.nih.gov and we'll be happy to get back to you. Especially if you still had further questions or needed more clarifications than what you were able to glean from the webinar, please reach out to us. We're happy to help, and as well as find time to talk with Trish with any of your scientific and specific questions. All right. Anything else, Jim, Trish?
Thanks for coming and good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.